Good afternoon, Poland Forum members, Professor Judy Barmel-Schwartz, Director of the Arnold and Leona Finkler Institute Holocaust Research. Today is our last meeting for this academic year. During the year, members of the Poland Forum presented short lectures based on their articles from the new book Forum, Holocaust History, Holocaust Memory, Jewish Poland and Polish Jews during and after the Holocaust. Our book is really wonderful and unique. And thanks to you, friends, members, who contributed with your fascinating articles. I think I will hear about it later in Ruth's lecture, because she said to me, I read the articles and I would like to talk a little bit about the book. I hope that in the next academic year, situation in Israel will improve and we will be able to organize a conference that will be dedicated to the book. Today, our meeting will include 2 short lectures based on articles published in the new Forum book. First lecture will deliver Dr. Lior Alperovitch. Dr. Alperovitch wrote his doctoral dissertation about the influence of the relationship between Israel and German Federal Republic on shaping of the Holocaust commemoration in Israel between 1948 until 1965. His articles have been published in academic and semi-academic publication. Dr. Alperovitch teaches courses on Holocaust and its commemoration in Bezalel, the Hulon Institute of Technology, and has a position in the Mandel Center for Education Leadership. Dr. Alperovitch studies teaching Jewish law and keeping the commandments during the Holocaust with focus on Polish Jewry. The lecture today that we will hear from Dr. Alperovitch is based on the article that was published in the book, and the subject is the capacity of the Tzadik in the late 30s in Poland, according to the Akedat Yitzchak book. Lior, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Leah, for the introduction. I'm sure that my mother will be very happy to hear what became from her son. When I thought about the lecture and related to the article, I started to think that the most interesting thing that I have to say about it is not about the article, because you can read it, is about the process of writing it, because it was very, very, let's say, challenging. And in the next minutes, I want to show you some of my challenges, some of my questions, dilemmas, and what makes all this process very, from my point of view, very complicated. And first of all, I need to say thank you, a huge thanks for Judy that helped me all over the process to focus it, to precise it, to think what it should be in it, what's not, because at the first, if you take the first manuscript, it was based on a lot of theology and understanding of Hasidic movement. And the main challenge was how to translate it or to make it much more accessible to an historian reader and a non-Jewish historian reader that is a history of Hasidic movement and theology of Hasidic movement and the thought of Hasidic movement is not his precise field or topic of research. So first of all, take the title of the article, and when you read it, you see there is a huge challenge in the word, the words of the title. It means, first of all, what is a tzaddik? Tzaddik, it's an Hebrew word meaning a righteous man, but it's not really a righteous man. It's something that is a lot more than a man that do good things or help to the community or give charity. It's something based on his spirit that can do and can influence and can bring down a lot of prosperity and good from the divine. And so when we say tzaddik related to the Hasidic context, it's something that is between a community leader and a spiritual leader. And that his responsibility is for all his community, all his disciples, in the way that is not only responsible for the, let's say, spiritual prosperity, but into the material one. It means that in the bottom line, he's responsible for the money that they receive and they can buy food, for example. So when we talk about a tzaddik, now the second question is, what is a Polish type of a tzaddik? And in which way it's different from, let's say, Ukrainian type, or Romanian type, or Hungarian type? And in which way Rabbi Danziger fulfilled this kind of a type according to the anti-Semitism environment in late 30s in Poland. So this is the question that I wanted to answer in the article. In which way Rabbi Danziger, he was the leader of the second Hasidic community in Poland between the two world wars, was not only a tzaddik, but a unique kind of a tzaddik that emphasize or represent the Polish type in a good way. And in which way he dealt with the anti-Semitic environment. So when I took this general subject, I tried to think which is the best way to write about it, to learn about it, to say something interesting about it. So first question is how to make an abstract Hasidic concept accessible to the reader. It means how to take some terms, Hasidic terms, such as, for example, Kirvat Hashem. Kirvat Hashem in Hebrew, it means closeness to the Almighty. But it's not only a matter of geographical or topographical or something about the gap between the Almighty and the community or the tzaddik or the disciple. It's a matter of how the Hasidic Jew fulfill his religious purpose in life. It means how we feel the divine in its own soul, in its mind, in everyday life. So to take this term, that for my opinion, is the basic term for understanding the Hasidic movement revolution. Because if we take the mainstream of Jewish thought, it means the best way to achieve this Kirvat Hashem, it means to be close, to feel the Almighty, is to learn Torah. If you sit and learn Torah, and while saying learn Torah, the meaning is learning the Talmud, by this intellectual effort, you can achieve, you can feel, you can get this Kirvat Hashem. Hasidic movement create a revolution. It said no, because it's not a matter of an intellectual effort, it's a matter of existence. It means every human being got his own talent, something that is good for. And he can achieve Kirvat Hashem not only by the intellectual tool, by in different tool. For example, by the intentions. It's mean in Hebrew, kavanot. The way he intend to do the mitzvah, to fulfill the Jewish law. Or another example, by being in an happiness. It's called simcha in Hebrew. It means when the disciple, the Jew, everyone is fulfill the mitzvah with simcha, with joy, with happiness, when he feels that he's doing something to make the Almighty feel good about it, this is something that can, by doing it in an appropriate way, he can achieve Kirvat Hashem. And another one that I addressed in the article is dvekut. Dvekut is mean it's kind of devoutness or devotion of the spirit. It means that the man all time when he think about his life, he should think about in which way he's make the Lord, the Almighty, happy. Okay? And by creating some inner spiritual mind, or it's like a feeling that he's want to do this, he can feel that he's close to the Lord, close to the Almighty. He's feel dvekut. Dvekut is one. It's like a masking tape, that you can take two things and make them like a glue them together. So how can I take this kind of terms and now rephrase them, explain them, and without falling to an article that, as I said before, looks like an article in Jewish thought, Jewish philosophy, or in theology. So this was one challenge. The second one was how to summarize the entire history of Polish Hasidism in one paragraph, a short one and very precise. And just to example it, I want to show you the road in a, like, take this all historical access and show it, or like describe it by telling the stations, biographical stations of the Hasidic leaders, from the Baal Shem Tov till the rabbi from Alexander, Rabbi Yitzchak Menachem Mendel from Danziger from Alexander. We talk about approximately 200 years. So first I need to explain who was the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement. Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov, that was activated, he was actually in Podolia, in the Ukraine. What was his main act? What was his purpose? In which environment he was acting? How he gathered all his disciples? Okay. The next step or station is the well-known, it was the man that replaced him in the leadership of the Hasidic movement, Rabbi Dov Ber of Mezrich, the Maggid of Mezrich, that from Mezrich, that opened the first Hasidic Bes Midrash. It means the school, the Hasidic school. Okay, after explaining what is a Hasidic school, I need to address the students. And above all, Rabbi Elimelech from Lizhensk, that took the Hasidic movement from the Ukraine, from Volyn, from Podolia, into Galicia, to Poland, and explain what does it mean to take and establish a Hasidic community in the southern of Poland that is very different from the Ukraine area. And then to talk about his great disciple that create his court in Lublin, Rabbi Yitzchak Yaakov Horowitz, the Jose from Lublin. That in his court, now we talk about the creation of the Polish type of a tzaddik. Why? Because now we need to address to one of his well-known disciples, the holy Jew, that his name in Hebrew it's the Yehudi HaKadosh, Rabbi Yaakov Yitzchak Rabinovich, that was in a conflict with him. Why? Because if one main principle of Hasidic movement is the loyalty to the tzaddik, it means that the disciple is all connected to the tzaddik, in Poland start to create a new kind of perspective that said, no, this is not the main principle to be connected or 100% connected to the tzaddik. It means that you have the power to be a Hasid, even though you are not connected to the Hasid, to the tzaddik. It means that the individual part in Hasidism, according to this Polish type of Hasidism, was very, very, it was emphasized by them. And it's create a polemic area. It was a huge argument, a huge even a fight between them, between people that said, or Hasidic leaders that said, it means now that you create something new beside Hasidism. Okay, because the main principle, as I said, is to be devoted to the Tzadik. So the Yehudi Kadosh, the Holy Jew, create a separate court from the one that he was in Lublin, and one is inherited his great disciple, Rabbi Simcha Bunim of Pshischa, established it as we say, it's kind of he put it on a way, in a structure. I mean, he wrote a book about it, and he said, this is the main principle of being a Chassid according to the Polish type. One of his disciples was Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotsk, that a branch from Kotsk was Alexander. So if you are with me and you survived all this process, you saw how many stations I need to stop in, to describe, to tell about, to give to the reader something of what does it mean in Alexander, in the court of Rabbi Danziger, to be a Polish type of a tzaddik. When we talk 200, 100 years after all this process was in history. The third challenge was how to write about a character without almost no biographical details. Because although, as I said before, he was the second leader, the leader of the second largest Hasidic community in Poland, there are no research, biographies, something about him. All I could find is some newspaper articles, some chapters in books, encyclopedias, and a geography that's written by his disciples that that immigrated to Israel, and some memoirs, some paragraph in some memoirs of people that was originally from Alexandrov, and they remember the court of the rabbi. And I can share with you that all of this project started when I read a newspaper article in which I found one sentence when the rabbi was supposed to evacuate Alexandrov to Warsaw when the Nazis invade Poland. So he said, his brother said to him, maybe it's going to be like the Tahtat persecution. It's mean the persecution during the Ukraine rebel in 1648, 1649 against the Polish regime in the Ukraine under the rule of Khmelnytsky. And the rabbi said, I see farther more. And I said to myself, why say that? What does it mean? I see farther more. It means that you got like an historical perspective, and you see the anti-Semitism that we are going to confront with going to be much more worse than this traditional, the Cossack anti-Semitism, or it is something that is spiritual. You are a rabbi, you are a tzaddik. Maybe you got what we call the Holy Spirit, Ruach HaKodesh. You can predict the future. And I said to myself, the second option cannot be conceivable. Why? Because he's a Polish type of a tzaddik. He's much more rational. He's related. His all connection between him and the community is that he do not have like a divine forces. He cannot do to them miracles to help them. He believes in prayer, yes, but he doesn't believe in his place, in his capacity to be the main access that, for example, responsible for the health of his community. This depends in the community. So I got back to the first option. What does it mean? Gat is a unique historical perspective. It means that he knew in what is going to deal with, the jury in Poland going to deal with, that is going to be different from what? The anti-Semitism that held the Polish community after the death of Pilsudski and the Nazi invasion during the late 30s. And upon this, I create the whole article and I start to research, to find in historical newspaper, and I found he was politically engaged in some cases, some political cases. For example, there was a rule against the Jewish Shechita, and he was very involved. And some, as I mentioned before, as the memoirs that I found about people, disciples that was used to live there in the period. And I took his book of sermons and I tried to analyze it, in which way he talked historically to the public, but in theological terms, by interpretation of the Torah, by addressing holidays and some principle in Hasidic. So in the end, I started, I succeed to create this article that I think his contribution to the subject is, first of all, by dealing the character of Rabbi Yitzchak Menachem Mendel from Alexander, and to emphasize this point of his view about historical events and how he deal with them, related to his all Hasidic environment and personality and dynasty of being son and grandson of Hasidic leaders. And in the end, I need again to say thanks. I appreciate some scholars from the United States, like Glenn Dinner, and some scholars in Israel, Daphna Schreiber, and some friends from the Alexander Hasidus community here in Bnei Brak. I live in Bnei Brak. It's a town nearby Tel Aviv, that helped me to achieve some of the materials. And of course, Judy, that was escort me, and all this way took it from a very abstract subject, theological, full with the terms, and to create in the end an historical one that I believe people that are not really deep in this subject, in these materials, can get a clue, can get something about this subject. Okay, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much for your fascinating lecture, and I think that Judy would like to say deliver some words before she leaves.
Before I go, exactly.
Yes.
Well, first, thank you so much, Lior, for all of the thanks. I must say that your final article that was printed was very different than the first one that you sent me. And the first one was excellent, just not for this book. And you wanted to give up, and I said, no, 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 no. And you had the basis of a marvelous chapter already in the article. And I just gave you a little bit of pointers. You know what it's like? Everybody who knows, who has a driving license, learned to drive at some point. And you remember how we were sitting there with the L on our roofs, and the driving teacher would just put their hand down and move the wheel a little here and a little there. And, you know, heaven forbid if they put on the brakes, you were in trouble. But usually they just, a little bit. That's all I did, is I moved the wheel a little bit this way and a little bit that way, but you did all the work. And you redid it, and it all came from you. So you can say that I was maybe the midwife, but you did the delivery, and you did it all by yourself. And I think that you got across a very important point. Not just what is a tzaddik and what he does, but a very specific point of how this specific tzaddik thought in a certain way, which is what made him act in a certain way. And also to remember, and this was the most important point, this was not just an individual. This is the leader of a group. And when he acts a certain way, then it's like the song, and when the Rebbe sleeps, everybody sleeps. And when the Rebbe eats, everybody eats. So it's the same thing. It's a philosophy of one person, one man, but it spills over to an entire community. And that was what you got across so well. And it's what made your article so important in the book. And thank you for having the patience to write and rewrite and rewrite.
Okay. Thank you again, Judy. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. It was really so fascinating to hear the challenges because I was aware to the way that you did. And really, I congratulate you that you did not raise your hands and said, stop. It's really, and I think this session is so important for other scholars to learn so many things about methodology, about how you analyze things and you don't have any materials and how you compare. So really, thank you very much. And I am glad that everything is recorded because people can learn from this. Thank you very much. And again, thank you, Judy, for everything, because without you, nothing would happen, everything. The book, the form, everything.
I am nothing compared to you, Leah, because you do all the work in this forum and you put everybody together and you are the one who pushed for the book and we did it, all of us together.
Yes, and I hope for a second book. So we have dreams. We have a conference, we have a tour, we have a book. We must dream. Yes, thank you.
Be well till next year, and that's all.
Thank you very much.
My apologies that I have to leave early. And Ruth, I will hear you on the recording. As soon as the recording comes up, it'll be another day or two until Elisa puts it on our website. And I will then go in and hear it. And I'll write you my comments if I have any. So thank you all and have a good evening to everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Our second lecture will be delivered by Ruth Geall. Ruth is an independent scholar. Ruth is a social care professional for over 40 years. She was, yes, now she retired. And she was writing and researching her personal stories or family stories. And her research is connected to the history and life stories of her family. On her father's side, German Jews from Reichenbaum in Silesia, formerly Germany, and now Georgian, Poland. And I was asked by Ruth to speak about the book because she read the articles and give some perspective of the whole book. And in the end, to talk a little bit about the personal article. Ruth, the floor is yours.
Well, I think what I'm saying could be completely different than our last speaker, but I hope you'll find it interesting. In deciding what to talk about, I read a lot of the articles in the book. And what I wanted, and it's a very eclectic, span of different perspectives and articles on different subjects. But one thing that I think brings it together is, it's a wide range of research, but you can see the motivation behind the people writing it and the psychological and emotional cost of the researchers. And a number of the articles actually talk about that emotional cost. And I think that's, I really felt it in the Polish and the German writers that in order to make a decision to study Polish Jewish life or Jewish life, it was a really difficult commitment outside of possibly their youth and their childhood, and coming to it and being able to talk about it is an emotional experience. And that's true for Israelis. It's true for me because, it's a story. For me, it's more trying to bring alive a story I didn't know about my family. And I think in Jews who survived the Holocaust, their children, their grandchildren, either knew too much or too little, and very little in between. And I was one of the ones who knew nothing about my father's background. And in a sense, my research is a way of trying to recover that and find that and understand him better through that research. But what I wanted to, but I think one of the interesting things about us as a group is to come to terms with that emotional effect, which we've all had. And one of my suggestions is that rather than just do research, if we were an open group where we were all sitting in the same room, we would talk to each other before we start, we would talk to each other after, and we'd have much more understanding of each other as people and why we do, and be able to support each other emotionally in a way that we can't do on Zoom. And one of my suggestions is that we use one session to just talk to each other about our feelings and why we do what we do and what's our motivation behind it, and some of the trauma, and in fact, in a number of the stories you hear how pleased they are at what they were able to find for individuals who are alive, finding their stories. And I think that's all part of what makes this group similar to each other. And I think that's something we should value and develop and present as a group outside of the research we each do. But that's my view. And there is a personal cost for all of us in what we do. And it's something that would be nice to share. I was really pleased. Mikhail, I can't say his last name, Nezabitowski isn't here, but when I saw his museum in
Michał Nezabitowski, yes.
Yeah, when I saw his museum, that was my favorite museum. So I wanted to tell him that because I didn't know that I knew him otherwise, the pharmacy museum there.
The pharmacy museum in Krakow, probably everyone knows what about, yes?
Yeah. So my suggestion is that we maybe even use one meeting for each of us to just talk about that with each other and share our experiences. Okay. I think what I've been researching is different than many of the others because my father was a German Jew. He wasn't Polish, but he lived in a town in Silesia, which I knew the name of it. I knew it had been in Germany before the war, and I knew it was in Poland after the war, but I knew nothing of its history. And I was contacted by an Israeli who had lived there after the war because it was a major settlement of Polish Jews, mostly coming back from Russia and settling in Dzierżoniów, most of whom left in the 1950s, some early. I found some now in Australia. I didn't know about them before. And then in the 1968 was the final group who left, who mostly went, the ones that I interviewed went to the United States. But the majority left in about 1956 to Israel and our residents, I think sort of, Leah, in the area in which you live.
Yes, I know many of the people that were second generation that were born in the Dzierżoniów and studied at school.
And many of them don't know the story of their parents. Some of them know a little of it. So Dzierżoniów so I will talk a little bit about my research, is a really unusual place because it had a pre-war, very small Jewish community of about 100 people. My father, I don't know exactly when he left, but I know he was bar mitzvahed there. And I think he was bar mitzvahed and then his parents sent him abroad. They were a wealthy textile family. They didn't want to leave because they had a factory, but they sent their son away before Kristallnacht, and their daughter went on and my aunt went on the kinder transport to Britain. So it was a small community. There wasn't really a rabbi. I found about 5 or 6 surviving people who had lived there, and I've done interviews with them. One woman in California who's still alive and in her 90s. There was then a part of Gross Rosen, the concentration camp that was just outside the town. So it's actually in the borders of the town. And I have interviewed I've interviewed 2 actual survivors of that camp. And then there are a number on videos on the Holocaust Southern California site. And I've listened to those and I've transcribed their stories of the camp. It was a labor camp, if you want to call it that, where I'm sure more than half the people died, but some people did survive. And they were encouraged at the end of the war to settle in the town, and some of them did. And I've taken some of those interviews. I found the surviving children of the men who were recorded, and I've taken the end of those people's lives story. So I have something like 50 stories of Jews who lived there in the various different times. There are a couple of Jews who still live in the town, or did when I interviewed them. They may have died now. I've interviewed Germans who lived in the town who also had stories of, terrible things that happened on the border trying to get into Germany because they were stuck in Poland, and of Poles who came, most of whom came from Russia and or from the Far East back to Silesia for jobs, and also many of them had really difficult journeys having their families killed. So what I have are stories of all of these different people from a range of backgrounds who experienced trauma, really, within their journeys to Jejunov and after their journeys. Although most of them, when I interviewed them, were living fairly quiet, normal lives. And my dream is to put it together as an exhibition in Jejunov. I've had an amazing, I call it luck. Judy called it, faith, because I met the woman who's in charge of culture in Jejunov, and she's very keen to do an exhibition. So is the woman who runs the museum in the town. It's about putting enough material together and getting some funding to actually show the exhibition, but they're very keen. And I even have some people who want to do and have done a sort of recording of voices in different languages as a kind of sound installation that goes with the exhibition. And I've taken everyone has been photographed, and I have old photographs of everyone who I've interviewed. So I have a lot of the work. I haven't, because of what's happening in the world, I haven't been able to do, I haven't done any work on it for some time. Kamil Kajik, who is not a member of this group, but I know he's doing an exhibition in the Jewish Museum in Warsaw in 2025 of the post-war Jewish community. He comes from Jejunov, and I'm pleased to say he's used some of the interviews that I've done for that exhibition. I think he's taken about 5 of them to be able to use those as well.
Which museum in Warsaw? Which museum?
The Jewish Museum.
Polin Museum?
Yeah, Poland. Yeah. I think what he's told me, I haven't spoken to him recently, is at the end of 2025, he's curating an exhibition in the museum of post-war Jewish life in Poland, and it features Jejunov in it. I don't know, you might know more, Carol, about that than I do. No? Okay.
I haven't heard about it.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so that might be a nice time to come to Poland, to Warsaw. What else can I tell you? So that's the story. For me personally, it's been a wonderful experience. I've found family I didn't know I had in different places as I go around. I've interviewed people in Denmark and Holland and America and Britain. And where else have I been? I've interviewed a Swedish woman, not in Sweden, and Israel. And it's been wonderful to not just to travel for fun, but to also have a purpose in that traveling and to meet so many wonderful people. So that's my story.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Just one question. The synagogue you talked about, yeah. What is now? It's a building? It's a synagogue?
Oh, yes, I should. So the synagogue, that was part of the reason that the Israeli contacted me to begin with. The synagogue in Jejunov, which was Rashinbach, was one of 3 synagogues to survive in Poland or in Silesia. There were others maybe in Poland. It's one of 3 to survive in Silesia.
Yeah, in Wrocław also there is one.
There's one in yes, correct. And there's one somewhere else. I'm not sure where it is. And the man who contacted me wanted to try to find out why it survived. And he thought maybe one of the wealthy Jewish families in the town had paid for it somehow to survive. And he thought my family, the Weyl family, what I use as my middle name, which was one of the wealthy families, may have done that. I don't think that's true. and I think he's just my grandmother wrote something and put it into Leo Beck Library about the last service in the synagogue, and that's how he found me, because he read her. It's a 3-page letter about her life and the last service in the synagogue. I don't think they did. I think, if anything, it may have been the mayor of the town who didn't want it destroyed. I mean, he didn't necessarily want it to stay as a synagogue, but he didn't want to destroy it. So supposedly it was sold to the gardener of the Jewish cemetery, who did actually maintain the cemetery during the war and after the war. And it was used for various purposes during the war. I don't know, slaughter.
And now what purpose
It's now a synagogue.
I see a museum,
A
probably.
museum synagogue. It's a synagogue,
Synagogue?
owned by an Israeli.
Okay.
And there are no Jews to go to the synagogue, but it has a Torah. It is a synagogue. But it's also run as a museum. Raphael Blau is the man who owns it. He actually owns it. And he's very clever how he works with the town, because, they're kind of a bit scared of him. And so, he tells them he needs heating, and he gets heating, and he tells them he needs this, and eventually he gets it. And they're very careful to protect it. And it is in very good condition, actually. And maybe there's a service. I went to a service for its 40th, and it must have been 140 years at the synagogue. When the Soviets, when the communists came back to Poland, they put a new date on the synagogue. I can't remember exactly when it was built, but it was something like 1890s or something when it was originally built. But they put a date, post-war. But it was really an old synagogue. And there are lots of incredible stories about someone who did research on the first rabbi there, and he was found in his son was in Canada, and there are lots of interesting stories. I actually found my father was not a religious man. He was a scientist, and he, didn't believe. He was not a believer. But I found his Bible that he got for his bar mitzvah in Jejunov, in Reichenbach.
The synagogue.
And I gave it back to the synagogue. Yeah, so I left it for the synagogue. But what's interesting to me is he must have taken it out of Germany with him. He must have carried it with him all his life, even though he wasn't interested. And I also, about 2 weeks ago, found his tallis. My father had dementia, and I took all of the old photographs of Germany and lots of other papers, and I was going through them, and I suddenly saw this tallis, and I thought, I have a cousin who died, it must be his. And then I saw my father's name. Wow. He was called Klaus originally. He when he went to America, he changed his name to his middle name, which was Peter, but it was K. Weyl. So he kept it, and I find that really interesting. He never wore it. I can tell you, in my lifetime, he never wore it, but he kept it. And I think that's very interesting. And I just one other thing, which I think is a factor in life, which is my father would have never described himself as a Holocaust survivor. He left Germany, what was Germany at the time, in 1937. He survived. Not all of his family did, but he never talked about those who didn't survive. And I think he had terrible guilt because he was a survivor. Easily. He was an easy survivor, and he would have never, and that was just a guilt that he had.
You could feel it. You could feel it during the years. You could
Sorry?
You could feel the guilt's feelings, his guilt's feeling. You could feel it.
Yeah, I could feel it. Sorry, I could.
Did you feel the way he thought that he's guilty?
Yeah, I mean, he never spoke German.
Okay.
He would, if Germans came, he would listen to them in German, and he would answer in English. He had a heavy German accent, I can assure you, through his life. And he never spoke. What's interesting is he didn't talk about I mean, there are some funny stories. Like he was a professor, and someone came from Israel, and they were trying to attract him to the university. So they asked my parents to take him to dinner. And the man said, "You know, he was an Israeli. I was a Russian, and I lived in Poland for a while in my youth." And my father said to him, "Where did you live in Poland?" He said, "Oh, you would know it. It's a small town in Silesia." And my father said, "Try me." And of course, it was the town my father grew up in.
Jordanian, yes.
Never said there were Jews. There were 27,000 Jews there. He knew that. He said, "Oh, what a, isn't that an amazing coincidence?" He knew it wasn't a coincidence. He didn't say it. And so there were a lot of incidents like that where he knew things, but he didn't
Talk about it.
He didn't talk about them, and he didn't tell people. And his parents both survived as well. So I had grandparents, and so in a sense, he had a family. My grandmother, I think, committed suicide, but again, it was never said that that was the case. So there's all those kind of, it's keeping him alive for me, I think, and not just him, but the story of the family alive, which is important to me. So that's why I do it, and I love doing oral histories, and I love meeting people. So that's my story. But I do think what would be nice is to have a way of sharing. In the book, there are other people, Poles and Israelis and whatever, who also, everyone who's doing it is doing it for personal reasons. You're not just doing it because you're a historian. You don't deal with something as stressful as the Holocaust just because you're interested in whatever. And in fact, I'm sorry, I don't remember his name, but there's a very famous, he was an American Jewish historian from Breslau. And my father grew up in his family. I found that out. He never said that. My mother knew this because we saw him on stage once, and my mother told me the story. He couldn't go to school in Reichenbach, so he went to a Jewish school in Breslau, and he stayed with the family. He boarded with this family of this historian. And my father said, yes, in his youth, he was always interested in Napoleon. He did the history of Napoleon. Well, after the war, he did the history of the Holocaust. So he was a historian by emotional being, but there was something else that made him deal with, the German Jewish situation. So I think that's kind of, as a group, that's something we all have in common. And I think it would be nice to explore that.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Maybe in Warsaw, we can do that.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ruth. If anyone has any question to Ruth or to Lior, the floor is yours for questions. We have some minutes, 5 minutes for discussion. So, Carol?
Maybe I could ask. It was a quite different meeting from others because there were no presentations, and we did something that Ruth said, that we could hear each other like in a conversation. So it was very interesting for me. And my first question is to Lior. You talk about the word that was in Poland before the war. It is like some lost word. I live in Falenica. It is quite near to Góra Kalwaria. It's Geall. Also in Falenica, the Tzadik from Geall was, going to holidays. So my town, when I live now, was a stage of quarrels between different Hasidic groups, because there were some. I read about it in the Iskor book, and it is something that is similar in other cities, like in Ostrów Mazowiecka. There were Hasid dynasties from Kotsk, as you said, and from Geall, and they were fighting each other. I don't know why they were fighting, but for sure it was something important, because in many ISKCOR books, this topic is visible. And my question is, so it is something interesting for me, because in my town, Jews were in minority before the war. So now this is a huge, I don't know, gap in the memory of the city and the citizens of Falenitsa. And my question is how Tzadik Danziger was answering to Shoah, if he believed that the achieving Simcha during the Shoah was possible, or is there any difference between him and other Hasidic schools in answering to Shoah, to the, I don't know, purpose, the theological meaning of it, if there are any difference in their teaching, theologically speaking. I'm a Roman Catholic. I have also theological background, so it is also interesting for me to hear the answers. I can read in the testimonies the answers that the priests were giving to Shoah, but I will be interested in the answer of Danziger and others.
Okay, it's a huge question. Huge question, because there are several answers that the scholars, religious Jews, gave during the Holocaust and after the Holocaust, why it happened. This question related to a much more fundamental question, which is the existence of evil. Because Shoah, let's say that in the theological perspective, it's not a matter of proportion. It's a matter of existing. In which way God, that is good, is all know, can do anything, allow the existence of evil in the world. So to deal with this kind of question, we can go to the Bible, to the book of Job, for example. So how do the existence, just a moment, it's my boy, he's having bar mitzvah in 2 weeks from now, so you need to say hello. His name is Shmuel, he's having a bar mitzvah, and now he needs to go to study. Hamud, the cute one. So this is a fundamental question in Jewish thought. Rabbi Danziger, in his biography, right immediate after the Nazi invasion, it was escape to he was to Lodz, and from Lodz to Warsaw. He was in the shop of the rabbis in the Warsaw ghetto, finally deported to Treblinka and be murdered by the Nazis in Treblinka. So what he said to his community, to his disciples, even if he said, it didn't written. So if you take his book, it's called Akedat Yitzchak. Akedat Yitzchak, the translation to Hebrew, it's the you know what is Akedat Yitzchak? Okay. I know. It's a name given after the Holocaust, when one of his disciples gathered all his sermons under one book and gave, it's like an anthology of his thought, but it's very eclectic. So I didn't found any something related to National Socialism or to the condition under the Nazi persecution. He didn't wrote about what happened, why God gave us this kind of experiment, of challenge, or like a test. He didn't address it. I can tell you that other rabbis surely did. Some of them. So it's like a punishment of sin of Zionism. Some of them, so it's like a punishment of something that happened during the biblical period, like selling of Joseph by his brothers. There is, let's say that the more convenience one that I heard said, this is a matter of existing in the human society. It means the Lord create our free will, and because of that we have a free will and we have anti-Semitism, this kind of situation could happen. Not because of our sins, but because of the nature of Jewish hatred and free will. When free will is fully opened, Auschwitz can exist. So the responsibility is not toward the Almighty, it's toward the human society. But I didn't find anything, any theological answer in his book or in his sermons or something that had him something. About the joy and happiness, of course, he said to his disciples that they must understand that this is a time to be more religious, to be more devoted to the Almighty, because this kind of unique situation, he didn't describe it as very unique or something that is unrepresented, but he says that this is the time for us to be much more Jewish than other times. Why? Because the Nazi persecution, like the anti-Semitic one before in Poland, was because we are Jewish. So it's a matter of being loyal to the community and to be optimistic that in the end it's going to be okay. In the end, even though there are people that are going to suffer. In particular, stories, they're going to suffer and suffer a lot. But in general, finally going to be a salvation for the Jewish people.
Thank you.
And this is in a nutshell, because we got no time for this. It's a huge, huge question.
Very interesting topic, really.
There is a book about it, if you want to, maybe you heard about it. It's called Struggle with God.
No.
It's anthology that gathered by Gershon Greenberg and Stephen Katz. Struggling with God, something like that, if I remember correctly. Gershon Greenberg and Stephen Katz, editors. You can find a lot of response to the Holocaust during it and after.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think that we over time, but if anyone would like to ask Ruth before I close this session, really, it was fascinating today, really unique and really different. Not with the presentation, but to hear you people and to hear you with your experiences and challenges and difficulties. It was really wonderful, and we will adopt it for the next year. And I take what you said, Ruth, and yes, and Lior, your way of presenting the methodology and the difficulties. It was really important. Thank you all. I will write to you all. And yes, we will hope, we will be optimistic, because we don't have any other chance. Because after the whole, always, as I'm saying, that how people could revive after the Holocaust. So everything can be, if you look at the Holocaust survivors, the resilience that they present for us, it's really in these difficult times in Israel, it's really strengthened us. So yes, we will think about, yes, next year I will talk with Judy about the conference. Of course, it has to be in Poland because most of the scholars of this forum are from Poland. So it will be easier and to come to Poland for us Israelis. And we will think about it, we will plan it, yes, and we will plan another book. So maybe the next book will be a little bit different, and Lior, you could write in the way you think, not especially historically. Let's see, we will talk about it. And Ruth, you will have the chance to forward with research or other topics. So really, thank you very much for participating here today. And I wish you good evening, and we hope for better days in Israel. And I myself come to Poland. Carol, soon, I will, not this week, next week, the week after, I will write to you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.